So welcome to this webinar hosted by BS Group. This is the third Voyage Efficiency for CII Compliance online series. And today we'll be presenting views on different, let's say, views on CII and how to comply with CII and from different contributors at this webinar. We have people from Vesops, that's me, Søren Winther Hansen, and then we got from Aspire Global, we got from Tor, we got from Amphibside, and then we got from Nautor. And we'll present, or the presenters, they will present themselves when we get to their presentations. But there'll be a presentation series, so around 15 minutes per presentation, and then there is a Q&A function in this webinar, so you can ask questions in the Q&A, and then we'll answer them during the session here. After all have presented, we will have some time to discuss even more, depending on, of course, the time that's left. But then we can handle some of the the questions in public that has been coming in during this presentation series. So, in fact, I'm going to start this presentation series here. So I'll switch into sharing my screen, and then just a second. My name is Søren Winther Hansen. I'm representing a company called Vesops. We are a vessel performance software company from Denmark. And I'll be presenting something about performance prediction for different operational profiles. I'll switch to the agenda. So I'll just introduce what Vesop is and what Vesop can do. Then I'll talk a little bit. I mean, we know the CII now, and we know it's a metric for CO2 emissions, but we also know that it's heavily depending on the operational profile of the vessel, and maybe not only on, or definitely not only on the energy efficiency of the vessel. So that's something I want to share my views on, and then different performance indicators that we see are related to the CII and where do we use them. And then we'll look a little bit on the EU ETS, because operational profiles are definitely going to be something that will have an effect on the carbon or the emissions trading scheme that will be implemented by EU soon. And then a little bit about the data. So, because one thing is data that we get, and we do performance analysis and so on. So, but accurate data becomes even more essential now. We are talking about carbon taxes and so on. So, so I'll look a little bit on that also. So Vesops, it's a performance software performance company, and what we do is we do consultancy both on SEEMP, EXI, and CII. We've been very busy on that, helping ship owners with the compliance towards the new rules here on the 1st of January 2023. Then we have looked a bit on retrofit solutions, where can we improve some design features on the vessel, and does it help on the EXI? So we have done that on some older tonnage, and then we do a lot of performance advisory, and then we have this performance software. And myself, I've been working in the industry for a number of years and been working with this performance of ships in different companies, both service providers companies, shipping companies, but also for class. So that's something I've been working with for a while. So based on that, we have developed some software, of course, because we get a lot of requests, and then all the requests that we have got, we have kind of put that into a software solution. So we can do a lot of the requests that our clients ask about by putting data, putting the vessels, modeling the vessels, and putting into our software, and then give them some answers in a software solution where they have some dashboards where they get some KPIs, and then they can take decisions. So that's basically, I think most of you know software solutions like this. What we have tried to put a lot of effort in building in this piece of software is that we are looking a lot of on trajectories and prediction schemes, because one thing is we, we we can show you how it is, but another thing is that you probably are more interested in is how will it be then for us? If we look half a year ahead, if we look a year ahead, or even 10 years ahead, where will we be with our vessels, with the regulation scheme that we have right now for emissions? So that's something we have been building over the last period here. Operational profile. So that's something that I've been very focused on in the time that I've been working on this, because I think the operational profile is very important. When you are trying to estimate something on the vessel, you need to know a history about the vessel. So you would probably want to know something about the key parameters that's affecting whatever it is that you want to examine. So in this case, for the CII, we would look at the speed and the draft. We would look at consumption distribution and time and distances, and the main engine load. And then we could put that into some sort of overview where we said, okay, the last half year we have done like this. Let's export that and put it into a CII calculation, and then see what effect did that have on the CII. And then we can do other historic profiles, and then look at the effect on the CII, and then say, okay, it seems like on this route, this profile is the most suitable for us, and then go with that profile. Of course, if you can go with that profile, because if you're in some sort of restrictions with a charter or something like that, then of course you have to discuss that with the charter. But you can look at that on a vessel specific level. You can look at it on a class level. You can also look at it on an operation area level. So let's say you do a liner trade somewhere, then it's interesting to know which vessels are running with which profile, and which effect does it have on the KPI where you're looking at them. And that could be the CII, or it could be some other profile. So it's interesting to see it on a high level, but also on a detailed level on a vessel level. You could build your library of profiles. So you could have some certain routes where you have some profile attached to it. So you know that if you have to occupy a vessel at a certain route, then that profile would be the best matching one for that particular route. This is something we have tried to put into the software. So if you have a profile, or you have a library of profile, you can use them in the software to do different simulations on the future view of this. And why are we looking at operational profiles? Because we are normally looking at energy efficiency, but for the CII, which is what we are really looking at this time, then the operational profile is to a high degree the main driver for the rating. So the rating that you come out with, I mean, you as an owner, you can have a very efficient, energy efficient vessel, but if it's operated badly, then it can be as energy efficiency as it wants. If you then come out with a bad rating, this is probably because of the way it's been operated for the period. And here we know that idle consumption is something that really hurts the CII. We have gotten some correction factors involved. So if you have CII heavy operations with your vessel, it could be a container vessel with a lot of reefers. It could be a gas carrier that cools a lot on the cargo, or any other special factors for a vessel. You can deduct some of it in the CII rating. Then if you look at historic data, then you can see which profiles then has a high cost on my CII, and then you can start looking at okay, can I set up a formal library for this, and then look at the CII costly routes. So we can try to do that. Here's an example library of 4 different routes to the same destination. So that's probably some tanker that's sailing some oil to China, and it can do it from the Arabian Gulf. It can do it from uh, West Africa, from Brazil, and then from the U.S. Gulf. And depending on which route you are choosing, I mean, the idle period for this type of vessel that's sailing here, it's the same. So normally, when everything runs smoothly, it's 8 days per voyage. There's some days for loading, and then there's some days for discharging. And then, of course, if you have a long route, you can do so many voyages per year, and if you have a short route, you can do so many voyages a year. But what's good for the CII is the long route. So it gives you, if you're just sailing with your vessel on that route and you have that same idle periods as the others routes, then you'll come out with an A. If you sail on the short route, the Arabian Gulf to China, then you're on D. And it doesn't really matter how which energy efficiency the vessel has that you put into this trade here, because it gives you a D because of the operational focus. So you can run your vessel very efficient, but you still end up with a D on that. And then you can say, okay, if it's the same type of vessel that's running on different routes, then
So at this time, can you guys hear me? Awesome.
Yep.
Yes. Good.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. At this time, I'm gonna start my presentation, and then we'll move on, and any questions, we can get back to Sorkin. So let me share my screen. So thank you everyone for joining us today. It's a pleasure to represent Spire Global today, and within Spire Global, Spire Weather. My name is Nick Rodick, and what I do here at Spire is a meteorologist, but specifically customer success management for the Spire Global Spire Weather team. And today I'm really excited to talk about how climate change is impacting the maritime industry, and specifically how the maritime industry can have an impact for decarbonization, and also decarbonization, and also within that specifically how Spire is making a difference within the actual maritime industry to help this hot topic right now, and why we're all here today. A little bit of background for those of you who don't know about Spire Global. At its core, Spire Global is a satellite company. So what we do is we develop, build, and operate a constellation of satellites, of over 120 satellites. On the right-hand side, you can see a picture of our workhorse. It's called the Lemur, and it stands for Low Earth Multi-Use Receiver. And the payloads on board, they are specifically AIS data, ADS-B data for tracking maritime and aviation across the globe. In addition to that, we have a weather payload on board that observes radio waves. It's a technology called radio occultation. And that's the team that I'm representing today here on the weather side. And a radio occultation specifically observes the radio waves throughout how the radio waves bend throughout the atmosphere. So by observing how the radio waves bend throughout the atmosphere, we can get a really good picture of temperatures, relative humidity, pressure throughout a profile of the atmosphere. And then given the size of our constellation, again, over 120 satellites in orbit, we can get a really good picture and a lot more observations than traditionally over oceans from pole to pole. This is critical for accuracy of weather forecasts and a real game changer in cutting edge technology within the weather and ultimately the maritime industry. I want to take a step back here and look at the big picture of the evolving climate. So,
Nick, could you reshare your slides? We don't see your slides anymore.
Okay.
Sorry.
Can you see my slides now?
Yeah, excellent.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So again, I want to take a big overview look at the evolving climate. So according to a recent study by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, they've come to a few critical conclusions. That being that weather is becoming more unpredictable. We're seeing intense tropical cyclones on the increase, including these tropical cyclones becoming more and more further in track towards the poles. We see that with storms that actually interact with the jet stream as they go further north and become almost like a hybrid, like we've seen with Hurricane Sandy and others throughout the past decade. And ultimately, climate change is having an impact on ocean currents and sea ice as well. So as sea ice melts, it's creating salinity changes, which ultimately impact the currents, ocean currents, speeds, and ultimately even locations. This is critical to understand as we go forward, and how we're having an impact on the future of the climate is one of the main reasons why we're here today. According to a recent study by GHG, the maritime industry, according to GHG, shipping industry can have an impact, or in general, 2.5, it's been seen that around 2.5 of the total CO2 emissions globally, worldwide, have been due to the shipping industry. So we can certainly have an impact on climate change. And it's important that we recognize that actually climate change is causing more extreme weather, which ultimately impacts the maritime industry as well. So I want to take a look at how nature itself, and specifically in this slide, met ocean variables such as currents, surface winds, and ocean waves can have an impact on decarbonization. So for example, currents can have an impact on fuel consumption, whether you're riding a favorable current or avoiding a non-favorable current. It can also have an impact. Moving on to surface winds, for example, ocean variables can have an impact on specifically safety. We see this with large cargo vessels and surface winds, for example. That can also have an impact on fuel consumption. So it can both have an impact on safety and fuel consumption. And when we talk about ocean waves, vessel motion can get impacted, creating safety hazards, along with we have to take a look at ocean height, but also ocean wavelength can have an impact on vessel motion and ultimately safety and fuel consumption. So all of these work together and are interconnected, and we need to understand. Beyond just met ocean variables, we have to understand atmospheric conditions, such as temperature, relative humidity, and cloud cover. For example, in this slide, it talks about reefer market. And when we talk about reefers specifically, we're not only worried about ocean variables, but we're also focused on, for example, temperatures that can impact cooling. So that's something to take into account when we're actually on the voyage. And so it can impact whether we take a shorter or longer route because of the temperatures and the ultimately impact on fuel consumption. And this is a really critical thing to point out when we talk about voyages. And speaking of voyages, we recently, Spire Weather has joined a partnership, a larger partnership with the University of Southampton, and the Ellen Turing Institute. All of these organizations have been working on algorithms for performance optimization engine that could essentially reduce fuel consumption and CO2 emissions by 5 to 10%. And as Spire Weather, we're a critical piece in this, as we're bringing more accurate weather data to this optimization engine. And for short, it's called TVOS. What's special about TVOS is that this partnership and the organizations involved, such as the Alan Turing Institute, have been working on essentially this engine that incorporates algorithms that are not only you just get one input and one output. It's multi-inputted and multi-outputted. That's the key here. So they've been working on the algorithms for they have been working on the algorithms for decades. And this is a critical piece to the puzzle, as you're not just putting in one input, such as a weather route, and getting one output as this is the best route according to for weather. You're essentially taking all of the potential outputs into a consideration. And we have an example here on the next slide where this performance engine, optimized performance engine, can take into account, and it's all through an API that's very customizable. So if you give us a weather route, for example, on the right-hand side, it will calculate 300,000 potential routes all in one API call. And it takes into account if you want to worry about weather, in addition to decarbonization or just-in-time arrival, it's all calculated in one specific algorithm, and ultimately 300,000 computations are part of this. So TVOS is really making a difference within the performance optimization and voyage performance optimization. And then when we talk about getting to ports themselves, so when the voyage is complete, we have to take into account fog, such as weather phenomenon such as fog, storms, and tides that can all have an impact on congestion, for example, safety, with offloading and loading of vessels. And it's important to point out that we are really focusing on the weather aspect of this. So we have port optimized forecasts, for example, that focus on our best weather forecast, in addition to bias corrections on local sensors to really help understand this congestion and ultimately the impacts of weather on the ports. In addition to the voyage optimization engine and the port optimized forecast, we have a full suite of weather solutions for maritime industry that I wanted to mention, that are all having an impact on decarbonization, in addition to safety and the many nuances of maritime industry. So we have a specific maritime weather API. So it's just one API as a product serving different data sets. So we have multiple data sets and products that you can get through this API with multiple options for data delivery, including JSON, GRIB2 data, and a few more. So at Spire Weather, we have a full suite from forecasting, weather forecast. So again, looking back at what we started in the beginning of the presentation, where we have that full 120 satellites in orbit. We take all of that data and input it into numerical weather prediction models and weather forecasts that actually can go out 15 days into the future. And then we add different analytics to that, such as the port optimized forecast, like I said, that is bias correcting for local sensors at ports. In addition to that, we have a global weather model. So we take all of that global global observations and put it into the numerical weather prediction model, and it goes out 15 days into the future. So you can get global point forecasts out to 15 days. In addition to that, we have products for astronomical tides, forecast by route. So if you give us a route, we can give you a forecast. And additionally, maritime risk insights and maritime efficiency insights. So if you have any questions, please be free to put that in the chats. In addition, you can contact me anytime. I will put my contact information into the chat as well. So you can email me anytime. And our Spire team, we really appreciate being part of this. And thank you. At this point, I'll hand it off to the next presenter.
Thank you, Nicholas. So as Søren, our moderator, is not available for some technical reasons, I will just continue with my presentation. But as Nicholas also said, you can put in your questions into the Q&A, and we will do our best to answer them in writing. Switching to my presentation. One moment. No, it's gone. Great. 1 second, please. Strange. Just a minute, please. Doesn't seem to find what I was looking for. Here we go. Presenting and presenting. Here we go. Finally. Sorry. All right. So I will be presenting from the user perspective. So now we have heard about all the available weather data that's available in the weather APIs around the world. I'm from the actual shipping company. I'm from Torm. We represent a fleet of nearly 90 vessels. My presentation today will be around automation and digitalization and routing optimization, and also briefly about how we use it to avoid too high CII for our vessels. My name is, as I mentioned, Elias Halmslykke. I'm an ex-Marine master. I went ashore nearly 20 years ago and have been dealing with performance management, technical management of all sorts on board different types of vessels, and also routing optimization. So for the purpose of this presentation, I tried defining sort of the baseline for automation and digitalization, and I tried putting in this. So automation means using machinery or other technology to allow processes to take place without human intervention, input or work. And that's sort of how we have decided in our digital strategy to work with all the data that we can harvest, making it automated and send it to the vessels. Digitalization is the process of integrating all the data and all our automated processes into our operational platform, because that's the next very important part. once you have all the data and all the smart algorithms and all the smart methods, then you also need to integrate it into your organization to ensure that you have a safe technical management and always being efficiently supported. We work with many different suppliers in our routing optimization teams. And all of these suppliers, the criteria is that it has to be API available, because as you can imagine, that if you want to automate a lot of things, you cannot have PDFs or phone calls or manual emails in this process. So therefore, all the partners we work with in all our optimization and digitalization is API driven. Polestar, who is a AIS provider, could be a lot of other providers, but we have a very good data set from Polestar using AIS. DTN is delivering the weather data. Veson is delivering all our operational and commercial data. Our in-house BI team and advanced analytics is developing all our functions. We work together with companies like Yara, where we have a certain amount of vessels with installed equipment to automate constant power. Our vessel performance provider is VPS, and our voyage optimization calculation tool or algorithms is from Optimum Voyage. Some of the, you could say, the road that we began a few years ago here in TORM was we began identifying what data sets we had available, and then trying to build very simple alerts for our vessels, so that whenever one of our vessels in the future, in the forecast, was expecting bad weather, it could be cyclones, it could be ice, it could be ice warnings, the Newfoundland ice border, extreme seas, all sorts of events impacting not only the safety of the vessel, but definitely also the consumption and the time and the ETA accuracy of our vessels to the benefit of our customers. We made alarms and alerts for this, and today we have a full service up and running, fully automated, looking ahead of the vessel route, looking also at the AIS position and taking any means of danger that it can find ahead of the route, and alerting not only the vessel, but also our commercial operators, our customers ahead in time, so that everybody is aware of what is going on from the two pilot stations between port to port. It's a very effective tool, and we receive a lot of positive feedback from this process, because it is correct that, of course, our vessels, they can see out the window, they can see through their systems what will come, but still we're talking about humans, we're talking about effects, and making sure that everyone in the organization is automatically notified when things appear. You also have sort of a better mean of having a good dialogue between the shore organization and the sea organization. When we speak about our routing, this is also a fully automated process. We collect data from all our different systems, and via API, we submit it to our vendor. Our vendor then crunch the data and calculate a proposed most optimum route. We then sort of take it back in our systems, and we will then be the one sending it to the vessel so that they can incorporate it into their systems. We have spent nearly a year and a half in developing sort of an optimized platform, so that our navigation officer on board, always before he comes to the noon watch, receives an updated routing file. We can also submit it and deliver it many times per day, but at optimal, we do it once per day. In order for him to get a proposed route, he is not supposed to follow it if he does not agree with it. We make it as a recommendation, and the reason why we do it is simply to try to support him in avoiding the bad weather. We know from all our engine models and engine curves, vessel-specific curves, that the difference between navigating in calm sea and example 6 meter seas for an average vessel of ours, the majority of our fleet is MR, it's around 35% bunkers. In addition, in added consumption, if you were to maintain constant speed, obviously you don't do that, but let's just make it into time instead, you would have an equivalent time loss if you were trying to force your way into high seas. This, on the positive side, with the new CII, also benefits our CII because circumventing high seas areas, bad areas, cyclone areas, you avoid the risk or the exposure of extreme consumption for your voyages and thereby also for your CII calculation. How it works is that it simply just looks, not simple, it's not simple at all, but it does look up the wave height, the swell height, the wind speed, and also the currents. And as Nicholas from Spire mentioned, these are critical parameters for optimizing your voyage, and it's also critical that you have a supplier who have API and stable API deliverables on the weather so that you can use this in your forecasting. And as shown on the screen, what it does is that it tries to consider the shared route from the captain and tries to optimize it to avoid bad weather or extreme currents, or simply just to optimize the voyage in itself with all the parameters that you can think of. Could be cost, could be bunkers, could be bunker curves, could be the wave models for the vessels, could be the actual weather. How it does in practical terms is that we have spent 3 years in analyzing the effect on our vessel hulls from the waves so that we have accurate models for each of our vessel, also considering the most recent hull condition and engine status of the vessel, so that we every month, in practical terms, we update our performance models of our vessels, feed it into the system, and the system will try to determine the most optimal passage to the extent where you save the most fuel and to the extent where you still fulfill the charter parties or the customer requirements in terms of speed and avoid bad weather. Other projects we have been looking extensively into is seasonality. All of those to this conference who have a navigational background will know that there is a huge difference in the most optimum voyage crossing the bigger oceans, depending on the season. So we are also sort of trying to implement seasonality in our routing optimization. It is far from a simple task. We have some experts working on all data we can harvest from all tankers in the world, AIS, in order to develop algorithms to try to avoid getting our vessels into seasonal high-risk areas. On the optimization for the actual route itself, we have spent quite some years in making sure that our vessels and our technical teams on board and also ashore is capable of supporting and using concepts such as constant power. Fuel up from Java is one system where you push a button. Other vessels may only have engine governors where you can apply fixed power, fixed torque, or fixed RPM, depending on the maker, model, and design. Benefit from using constant power or whatever is available is that whenever you encounter bad weather, your speed will automatically, as you imagine, the waves will get higher, your speed will drop, which is perfectly okay if you look at it from our perspective in the way that we are working, at least with our customers, because our speeds are defined as in good weather. It would be a different matter for our vessels on a time schedule. But for our vessels, this actually possesses a very good saving, and we can document it. We have now been doing it for quite some years. So this is another way of optimizing. Another way of sort of showing it is like this, where we to the left have a vessel where the captain is attempting to adjust the speed over ground by adjusting the RPM up and down. Thereby the consumption will also go up and down, and the speed, which is the lowest one, is almost stable. Whereas to the right we have constant power, constant consumption, speed drops, goes up and down depending on the weather, which is perfectly permissible under our terms, and thereby we harvest a saving, and thereby yet another CII benefit to the voyage. Can we measure it? Yes, we definitely can. And I apologize, it's not very clear, this graph, but it simply represents the amount of time that our vessels are in significant wave heights with more than 3 meters. The way that we do it is that we glue the AIS position together with the weather we have from our API from our weather vendor. And it means that we harvest something like 1.5 million, nearly 2 million signals per year. And we try to analyze what kind of weather are our vessels in. And we also over time look at, does our projects have any impact to the significant wave heights, about 3 meters in this case, that our vessels are in. And as you can see from the graph, we have actually managed to remove sort of the bad weather seasons after we launched our alerts, and also after we launched our OV, which is the name for this automated routing system. And we have sort of cut off the upper part of the worst sea heights being observed on board of our ships. Since this conference is also about CII, how we work with CII besides trying to optimize our voyage is that we look at each of our vessel bi-weekly at present. Over time, we will probably look at it a little less, but at present, we look at our vessels bi-weekly in order to understand if any of our vessels are increasing in the CII rating. The effect from, let's say we have as you can see on the screen, we have one vessel in a D, and then we need to understand why is it in a D. Is it because of the hull fouling? Is it because of the commercial decisions taken? And then we make recommendations based on that. Since we are a tanker company, and since we are trading global, plus the fact that we actually have a very, very good team making sure that our hull fouling is always at a minimum, and our paints are always of very good quality, and our propellers are always clean, and the engine conditions are very good. We have actually not observed any vessels in our fleet where we think that they will be in a sort of a red zone, a D or E, by the end of the year. We feel that we are capable of handling each of our vessels and making sure that they will become compliant with these CII rules. I know it's not what you expected to hear, but maybe because we have a very solid organization supporting the process, we actually don't have, at this point at least, we don't have much need for concern on the CII with the current rules. I'm sure that there will come more. So a little bit about the benefits that we see. We definitely see a measurable fuel saving from applying power management. That's constant power. We can see that the number of heavy weather incidents that we have observed and are being reported from our vessels have reduced from somewhere between 12 and 15 to 0 per annum. We did actually have one last year, very small one, and it was unfortunate, but it was a very small one, and luckily it didn't have any significant cost. But we do track them, and we do measure them, and we can definitely see a very big reduction in the amount. As I already mentioned, number of time we spend in high waves have been reduced significantly. And lastly, but not least, avoidance of a negative commercial impact. We have been able to reduce the CII, and thereby our commercial operation is not at risk in that sense. Not that any of our customers have asked us about this so far, or will be paying for it. Not at all. That was the end of my presentation. And as already mentioned, feel free to send your questions. I will stop my presentation here and stop my sharing. Thank you.
Can you hear me now? Am I back?
Yeah, we can hear you, sir.
Okay. Sorry about leaving you. I didn't see much of your presentation, Nick, but hopefully you can brief me at another time. Sorry about that. There was some equipment issues here. But thank you, Elias. I saw yours. So can I just ask fouling? So you say you don't have much fouling on your vessels, but let's say how could a fouled hull? Let's say you try to take decisions on only being in good weather, a good current and everything. But if you have a foul hull, could you sometimes be better not to take the shortest route, but just go through, take the longest route outside all the weather, or just go through the weather? I mean, of course, to an extent where, I mean, this fuel savings, would they, let's say for the foul hull, would that compensate for the long route with a clean hull or something like that? Are there anything that you're...
Well, it's a good question. Since I'm in the practical part of the business, so I also guide our vessels across the oceans. And funny enough, now that you're asking, we actually have one vessel right now in the Atlantic who decided to take the shortest route in 6-meter waves. The result is that he's making 5 knots, and the excess in his consumption, I can assure you, is extreme. So looking at your formula in your presentation, you need to divide your consumption into the distance. So the CII for this voyage will far be exceeding the expectation in our initial fixture for this vessel. It is not true that we don't have any fouling. Of course we have fouling. We have fouling just like every other vessel. We just have a dedicated team analyzing whenever our vessels are being fouled, using the performance measurements, and then setting up cleaning in our agreed locations to make sure that we don't at least have the fouling for too long, so that we don't have too much effect. So does it make sense to take a different route if your vessel is a high consumer? Commercially, yes, definitely. And we actually do that always. We have commercial people, so that if we have vessels that are, let's say that we cannot find a vendor on the West Coast after being idle in Mexico, then we have to wait until we get to the Far East. We will definitely make a decision that covers not only the fuel consumption for the entire voyage, but also the CII, and we would thereby make different decisions. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. All right. But I mean, I saw all your systems, right? So you have a lot of systems in play, and you combine them into something meaningful. But I mean, there's a lot of parameters. You can optimize on a lot of parameters, but I guess your main perspective is safety.
The main is safety, but now I've been in shipping for 30 years, so the main driver for any business case is savings. So that's we shouldn't lie to ourselves. Of course, safety is a very, very important parameter for any company, any shipping company, and definitely also ours. However, if you need to make investments, you need to prove that you have a saving for it. So I will not be sitting here and lying to anybody. I mean, when you make a business case, you need to prove that there is a saving, and the saving usually arrives from the bunker consumption.
Yeah, of course. All right. Thank you very much, Elias.
Thank you.
If you stay online for a while, and then I think we'll go to Alexander.
Thank you, Søren.
Can you introduce yourself and then
yes,
share your screen for the presentation?
Start to share my screen first, maybe. Coming back here. Yep. Do you see the full screen now? Søren, could you see the full screen?
Yes, I can see it. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. So thank you very much. Thank you for all the audience. I've noticed that you are almost 280 attendees this online meeting. That is really impressive. So I'm Alex Stegner. I'm a former researcher. I was at the head of an oceanographic group for more than 20 years. And I'm really excited to present you today a new generation of ocean data. And we start a company almost 1 year ago to develop this kind of data for the maritime stakeholder and especially for greener shipping. So the main issue is how we can gain, how we can save fuel and to reduce the greenhouse gas emission and also to reduce the CII. And using a different way to harness ocean currents at a fine scale. And that's very important. The fine scale, there is a big difference in the scale of the oceanic currents with the scale of the weather, the large scale storms. I've seen that in the media or in the shipping industry, there's many questions on CII. There's many companies that are really proactive trying to improve the efficiency. But there's still a lot of companies that don't do so much. And probably most of them will have at some point to do something when their boat will be rated D or even E. And I realized that this very interesting citation from Stuart Gordon, that ship owners could be stuck in a slow steaming CII in the next years. And what does it mean? It means that we know that there is a nonlinear relation between the fuel consumption and the speed, and just decaying by 1 knot, which is exactly the scale of typical currents in the ocean, you can gain 15% of fuel oil consumption. And if you are decreasing more, you will gain even more. So, of course, if you reduce the speed, you will have an impact on the final destination and on the ETA. So how to reduce the speed, gaining fuel consumption, of course, but minimizing this impact on the total voyage duration. I will then directly jump to a test case, a case study. I think it's very nice to show some case studies, some examples. What you see on this image is a satellite data. It's a satellite data of the sea surface temperature at the entrance of the Mediterranean Sea. This is here, you can see the Gibraltar Strait, and this is what we call the Alboran Sea, and there is a lot of structures, intense currents, eddies that really pops up on satellite images. And this is the sea surface temperature, and even more impressive is the chlorophyll. You see all these filaments that perfectly describes all these meanders and all these currents at relatively small scale. And what is quite difficult for numerical models, if they want to reproduce this oceanic situation, is to have enough initial data to capture this situation. And when we look at the operational model forecast, one of the leading operational model for the Europe, the Mercator Ocean, for instance, you see that the currents at the entrance of the Gibraltar Strait here slightly, I mean, even more than slightly, differs significantly from the patterns that you see on the satellite image. And okay, this is one model. If we take another model, the one which is provided by the NOAA, so the US model, you see that, yeah, quite well, capture quite well the big eddies, strong currents that you have just at the entrance, but it totally missed the second ones, and ultimately the ones that are following along the Algerian coast here. And so our paradigm is to say, okay, if you want to have a very precise information on the oceanic currents at a fine scale, you should rely on direct observations. So merging these different satellites data that you've seen, the chlorophyll, the sea surface temperature, the altimetry data, and by doing so, with advanced AI fusion, this is what we are doing, we can capture exactly all these patterns with a relatively good accuracy. And then it's a way, this fine-scale current will be a way to play with and to optimize the speed. So if you have no information, and this is the case for most of the boats in this area, they go straight in a straight line, direct route, and they don't really take into account these surface currents. But if now you have exactly the information, what are these currents for the next days or the next 2 days? So it's a short-term here forecast. It's not a long-term forecast. We are starting from observation. But on this short-term forecast, we are able here to propose an optimized route. So what you see here in green is the impact of the currents on the ship track. So when it's green, you have an acceleration of the ship due to the currents, and when it starts to be orange or red, you have a lower speed or speed reduction. And by playing here with the route, you can optimize the speed and the route, keeping the same destination time, the same ETA, and then you can save on one day 5% of fuel and 6% of CII on that case. But now, if you take a numerical model output, okay, you said I take one of the models that I've shown, one of the numerical models, it seems to be even better. You can save up to 6%. Well, that seems great. You modify the road, you get closer to the coast, having these strong currents that push you in the good direction. Nevertheless, we see that these currents were inaccurate in that sense. So if we apply this route now on what you can get from direct observation, what you can get from the satellite imagery, that you see that all these eddies were well positioned. You see that here, what you gain here, you will lose there, because here you will face currents on this countercurrent area and this countercurrent eddies. So in fact, what happens if you take this route, first of all, okay, the fuel consumption will be reduced, but you will have a delay in the time arrival, plus 2% in the ETA. So if you are really struggling on the ETA, you will speed up your speed, and at the end, you will lose everything that you gained at the beginning. So you'll be okay with the ETA, but you will gain nothing on fuel. And this is just an example to show that it's very important, if you want to do this fine-scale optimization, to have the most accurate data, and this is what you can get with a direct use of the satellites observation and the satellite data fusion. So we test our data and the AI fusion of oceanic currents, and we compare with various models, various numerical models, and what we plot on these bars, so in the Mediterranean Sea along the main Suez, Malta, Gibraltar road, and we get an accuracy of the current direction for almost 85 or even more, 85% of the cases for strong currents. And while the numerical models hardly succeed to get over 60%. And this inaccuracy is important and could bias the optimization that you make on the currents. So I would say that this new generation of satellite ocean data, and especially oceanic currents, built by computer vision using advanced AI from satellite observation, provides more reliable currents and more reliable data than the forecasts today and the model forecast. So today we did the case example. We are providing direct information on the ship routes. We can give the details of exactly what is the impact of these fine-scale currents every hours or per section of every 4 or 6 hours, where you will be you expected to be accelerated, or you will have a speed down due to the currents. So of course here you are accelerated. In that situation, you will be slowed down. And when you know precisely what will happen in the next 24 hours, you have a much capacity to adjust the speed and also to find the best route. So this is just to say that having harnessing reliable oceanic currents, it's always a win-win solution. First, you reduce the fuel, you reduce the CII, you have a much better control of your ETA, and this is what we are aiming, and this is our challenge and our goal, to provide you this high accuracy, reliable data. So if you're interested, don't hesitate to contact us and also to test our data.
Great. Thank you very much, Alexander.
Thank you. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me, of course.
I have one. So,
yes, please.
So this is an isolated case in the Mediterranean around Gibraltar. So how global are you on this?
So today, you're right that we are working, our demonstration is on the Mediterranean Sea for many reasons, because this is an area where the shipping industry don't make any optimization, and you have a lot of fine scale currents that you can optimize. But you have many areas where you have strong currents at fine scale, of course, that we are targeting. Another issue is that it's expected in the next years that the Mediterranean Sea will be a ECA zone, so a zone where you won't be allowed to use heavy fuel oil anymore. So then you will have to use more expensive fuel, and this is also the main gain to reduce the fuel consumption.
All right, thank you. Okay, but thank you very much, Alexander. Okay. Let's see. Keep an eye on the Q&A, and then I'll see if I can find Jakob. Is Jakob in the area? Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Can you hear me? Can you see my screen now?
Yes, we can see your screen. Please go ahead.
All right. Yeah, my name is Jakob Clausen, and I'm representing NAFTA and the product NAF Fleet. And I will be presenting monitoring and controlling of vessels CII. So both how you get an overview of your fleet and your vessels CII, and also whether the kind of levers you can pull to basically control your vessel CII, or at least some of them. I'm heading the office here in Denmark, and also overlooking the operation of NAF Fleet in general. So what I'll be going through today would first just be kind of a brief overview on the CII regulations, especially the latest parts of it that came out, entered into force 1st of November last year, 2022. A little bit of why the CII is becoming increasingly important for vessels owner, operator, and the industry in general. How you can improve your CII, some practical examples, how we are helping to monitor vessel CII and control it, and also a little bit about the future monitoring and prediction solutions that we would be coming out with in the near future. So if we look at the CII regulations, this is a much debated topic. We have presented on this before, but what I would like to highlight here is in particular the latest revised regulations from June that entered force in November, as mentioned, and in particular sort of the correction factors and voyage adjustments. So what does that mean? Well, if we look at the kind of the equation for the CII in general, that was based on having the CO2, the capacity based on dead weight of gross tonnage, and then of course the distance. And what was the changes introduced now is that there are different correction factors that applies for certain type of voyages, STS operations, etc. There's also certain deductions when it comes to electrical power or boiler consumption for discharge operations, for cargo heating, etc. So it's of course important that everything in this aspect, that the data can be accurate and can be captured, and you could say as a ship owner for your monitoring of your fleet, it's increasingly important that you have good control of that you capture all the right data and can report it into verifiers to ensure that you're not penalizing yourself by overstaying your CO2 emissions. Obviously, at least the deductions should be, of course, be according to regulations. There are also some correction factors for ice class and also reinforced hulls and chemical tankers, and of course also some distances that can be deducted, again based on certain voyages. So this is something to look out for, and we see a lot of questions and doubts in this particular area, both in terms of what data to collect and also how to monitor this in general. And this is of course something that we are covering as of today. So why is the CII kind of becoming more important for the industry? Well, first of all, the target for achieving the rating, the sea level rating, is becoming more and more difficult to achieve every year, as the kind of the reduction factor is 2% reduction per year. The other part is that of course that any rating in general, whether it's A or E rating, actually will comply with IMO regulations. So there's nothing that says that you're not compliant about doing it, but obviously the consequence is that you need to do more in making corrective actions in your SEEMP, and of course also in your SEEMP part 3, being able to document like your trajectories for reductions over the coming 3 years, etc. The other and maybe more new parts is that the industry is generally seeing a value in having more efficient tonnage. So one of the recent studies by vessels value is that a A-rated vessel versus a C-rated vessel, the C-rated vessel being kind of the target for the industry defined by IMO, has an average of 7% higher value. So of course, I mean that is of course the asset value, but of course also the transparency into say having this A to E rating is actually giving some more transparency into you say both vessel owner segment and the operator segment of course as well. So there's increasing awareness about this. The other part is that if you are scoring an E rating, or then your vessels are generally valued 12% lower compared to C-rated vessels. And of course there are newer and older tonnage here that of course an older vessels is typically scoring less, but of course there are also some operational factors which I'm going to focus more on here, because we are generally focused on how can you actually make active choices and better monitor and control vessels CII. Yeah, and what are the sort of the dynamic factors? So there are many different things that are affecting you say the emission part of the CII. If we go back to kind of the equation, if you look at you say apart from all the deductions you can do, because they're typically, I would say, in the minor order, then there are of course a lot of different initiatives, and many of them have already been mentioned. So that could be a speed reduction, could be reducing your auxiliary consumption, looking into your main engine performance, scheduling hull cleanings on regular intervals, or you could say based on the conditions, of course, using more shore power, weather routing, that's been mentioned a lot, either in form of comprehensive weather routing, including all elements with different strategies behind constant power or variable speed or what it may be. And of course, the better data we have to put into that, both in terms of model, weather data, etc., the better and more accurate outcome we can get. The other part on the more technical aspects is energy saving devices. So this is typically the CAPEX projects here is energy saving devices, could be hull form optimization, could be new propellers, special hull coatings. And then of course there are the more operational factors as well, like we see increasingly being used. So that is different alternative fuels, and we see more and more variations of biofuel or biofuel mixes that offsets your carbon footprint by having a different carbon factor. So that is of course also a measure that we increasingly see to be better in control of the outcome of your CII rating in general. The other part is what Søren was talking about, is a lot about of course, the operational profile and how we can affect that in you say, what are the dynamics there, and of course, the distance, the speeds there, the idling time, the utilization is of course a large portion of it, whether it's fully loaded, partly loaded, or in ballast, and what portion of the time is a huge affecting the outcomes. And if we see a little bit on the, you can say, what can you do to improve? And here I'm just trying to give some illustrative examples of say the speed and idling part. So if we take a base case, just say a 50,000 deadweight ton tanker, say operating at 12 knots with 50% idling time, then in this case we're taking an example where it ends up in a D rating, and maybe that's not that common, I mean, for most of the vessels. So we just creating like one example here. And of course, one strategy can be to do a speed reduction. So if we take the example where we'd say we take 1 knot speed reduction from the 12 knots, or it could also be from 13 to 12, for example. It doesn't matter that much. But just looking at the effect of it, is that we see a 9% reduction, and also the vessel moving from the D rating into a C rating. And this is assuming that we would need to transport the same amount of goods over the same distance in the given time we look at. Of course, we can also look at a constant time at sea. So say, accepting that we cannot change the operating profile, it would doing less speed would mean that we do less distance. So we would, of course, do less transport work. In this case, we would still achieve, I mean, we see a 7% reduction on CII, but we would still, in this case, be within the C rating. And of course, the rating is kind of a borderlining. There are borderlining cases here as well, and if it end up in C or D, can be a kind of more coincident of where you're starting out. But looking at the difference here is more clearly indicating what changes that we see. We can of course also look at the utilization of the vessel, and here we're just looking at, say, the time at sea, or the invert of idling time. So if we say we keep a constant distance and we increase the utilization, so spend more time at sea, then we can see a quite significant increase, of course, as well. And of course, the speed is also reducing, but we're basically delivering the same. So this is stating like the more time we can get the vessel to be on the way, the less we can keep it at anchorage, the more just-in-time approach we can keep. This actually have a pretty large effect on your outcomes. Opposite, we can of course see a quite negative effect of doing the opposite. So if it's hurry up and stop is the approach, then we, of course, with a constant distance, we would need to keep a much higher speed in the same time interval that it's on the way. And of course, that hits it, it's even worse than what we started out with. Yeah, and the other part here is plus 5% time at sea, but keeping a constant speed. So we maintain the same speed as the base case, and here we see a small change as well, but not very significant. Yeah, and the same with a reduction in time spent at sea. The other part that we typically look into from our perspective, if we look at from the owner's perspective, is maybe more on what they can do actually to improve the you could say the daily running cost of the vessel, or the technical performance, operational performance of the vessel. And one of the very effective ways of doing it is to reduce the basic load, because this is consumption that you have every single day, independent of you're doing, you could say, any transport work or not. This will hit you quite significantly over time. So if we look at the 20% load reduction in this case, then it actually in cases can actually bring you from, say, a D rating to a C rating. Of course, you can also do a hull cleaning in this example, assuming a 10% reduction in main engine consumption, and that of course also impacts your rating quite a lot. Or it could be, say, a combination of doing both. You could say a strategy of improving your hull cleaning strategy, and aiming at basic load reduction. And of course, there are so many measures you can take here. We are looking into a lot of different ones, but this is typically some of the ones that are easy to get started with, and will benefit you more or less every day, you could say, throughout the year, with a pretty significant impact. Yeah, if we look at, you could say, the ecosystem that we are providing, so we are not only providing performance services, but also a lot of e-navigation related services, digital logbooks, etc. And we have kind of created like an ecosystem where we can, you could say, get all the different parts to work together. So that covers both the shore part, but also what is happening on board. So what we are building is kind of a total ship operations platform where you say are in control and can monitor your whole fleet, as well as, you could say, effectively manage the utilization and efficiency of all vessels. And what we're doing in particular on the CII front is, of course, looking into how we can help monitor the vessel CII. So we have various ways we are displaying this, both on a fleet level, so you can quickly get an overview of which vessels that have in different rating categories, as well as monitor where they are progressing towards. So this can be, you could say, providing both in time series view or in collapse view, where you get, you say, all your fleet in one single page, and can deep dive into the different elements of it. The other part is, of course, on a voyage basis. So you could say monitoring throughout a voyage how the CII is progressing throughout time, and of course also can in hindsight evaluate what was the outcome, what was the CII rating, what was the CO2 emitted, distances, etc., etc. So we have different ways to both, you say, monitor and illustrate this, but also extract data if you need to support and report it to any third party. Another element on the more planning side of things, so we know that the speed and idling times, time spent at sea versus within the total voyage is impacting quite a lot on the vessel CII. So what we have done is to basically couple our vessel models, the collected data, and into kind of a voyage planning tool where you can basically simulate a voyage on the planning stage. So from, say, from an operator's perspective, you can plan out a route, get the voyage cost, the CII. If you know anything about expected idling time, you can also get the CII for the whole voyage end to end, which is one of the latest elements that we kind of included in here. Yeah. So this is kind of a what if scenario in terms of understanding this vessel, how will this perform here now for this upcoming voyage on a fixture, upcoming fixture. So you would not need to look into a fuel table or look into how the vessels are performing. This would all be handled in the back end. So this is actually using the vessel's model, tuned vessels model, and how it performs here now. Yeah. So the next things that are coming in kind of the future of our monitoring prediction solutions of CII, and how we're helping the customers to achieve that kind of target setting is partly to, on the monitoring part, providing more insight to the vessel's CII. So we have created a larger set of CII dashboards, vessel emissions breakdowns, and this is just showing a glimpse of it. But this is to provide more insight to say what are the dynamic factors affecting your CII. So not only saying what the vessel's CII is, but basically the root cause of the CII, and being able to look into this in a greater detail. So this is something that we would soon be releasing to market. Another part here is our emission simulation tool, which is very much along the lines that Søren was talking about. But this is basically a scenario simulation tool where you can take, you could say, define a scenario. So you have a base case based on a prediction of how the fleet or vessels perform here now. So basically taking an operating profile for last 3 months, 6 months, or 12 months, or you can upload a schedule for your vessels as well. You can also assume a given performance degradation, and you can input different performance optimization strategies as well. And the idea is here that you can get the prediction for the next 3 years, assuming different inputs of fuel composition, changes in speed, loading conditions, sailing time, weather factors, and other things. And then you get a full prediction that from where you are today, and then you can simulate a number of scenarios, compare them, and look into different vessels and how they change over time. So it gives both a fleet overview, vessel group overview. It could be all your MR tankers, or it could be individual vessels. And then you're able to see how they are reducing their trajectories compared to, for example, Poseidon principles. If you have your landing bend, you say landing of your fleet coupled up to your AER, for example. So this is something that is particularly interesting for sustainable link financing, where we have a number of customers doing this already today. Yeah, so to recap my presentation here, there are solutions available both for the monitoring and control of vessel CII. On the operator's decision impacting speed idling time, which has large impact. On the owners and technical managers side, it can be improving basic load consumption or proactively planning hull cleanings. Can be an easy way to gain control or change the outcomes. And then simulation tool and analytic tools can help operators and owners in decision for controlling vessel CII going forward. So that was all that I had to present for today. Thank you for listening in.
Thank you very much, Jacob. Very nice presentation. Thank you. I mean, it becomes more and more complex.
we try to we should aim at trying to keep make it simple, make the complex
exactly,
simple.
Exactly.
That's the big challenge here.
Yeah.
Because it is becoming more complex, definitely.
Yes. So when you talk about the basic load in your presentation, do you refer to auxiliaries and boilers, or?
Yes, mainly that. I mean, we have doing both separately, and I would say when we do strategies where we help customer proactively going into kind of saving strategies on for example your auxiliary consumption, in average, in most cases, the average outcome is that we can reduce it by 20%, and we have not done it for just a single. It's been a number of cases. We have seen similar cases on the boilers as well. So running in separate projects typically, and focusing one thing at a time, or maybe like not trying to do everything at the same time, but typically introducing new, say, strategies or improvement initiatives, run them for some time, evaluate, and then keep on building on that. And of course, starting with the low-hanging fruits is very much a good idea for getting results faster.
Okay, all right. So and then what's your opinion? You showed something about a vessel's value based on the CII. What's your opinion on valuing a vessel on the CII? So
I mean, obviously, I mean, all the I mean, we have a number of customers, and I think that is only increasing. That is where the lending of the fleet, like the interest rates, are basically controlled by Poseidon principles. So the AER, which is more or less like one-to-one CII, if we look apart from the adjustment factors and all this. So of course, the banks and everybody is pretty much saying that they are interested in greener assets, so to say. And I would say, I mean, we may not see that directly on the operators or charters yet, but definitely there's also quite much a green agenda there, driving, you say, more efficient tonnage will basically be given business, while the poor performing vessels will of course, it will be more and more tough for older tonnage to get into the market, I would say.
Yes, definitely. All right, thank you very much. So Elias and Nick, they disappeared. If I just because I was kind of disappeared for a while. I just wanted to discuss something on the. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just wanted to discuss on, because now we have a new game here in at least in EU, right? So we're going to look at the emissions trading scheme, where we have this introduction of a cap and trade system to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So that's something will be in EU over time. So we have like it will be introduced at 40% in 2024, up to 100% in 2026, and then you are fully, let's say, under the scheme when you are running 100% in EU, and then if you're in and out of EU, you're in the scheme with 50%. So that means you'll have to buy some carbon credits, and to buy carbon credits, of course, that's you should then look at what is my CO2 emissions, and how does that look for me, and then you'll also have included both methane and NOx in 2026 on the propulsion side of it, so you
Yeah.
have to recalculate that into some CO2, and then of course there's a cost for buying allowances, and what you'll probably be buying it from is some accurate and trusted data. That's probably your IMO DCS data or your UMRV data. And then it pays to emit less. And I think there's an expectation this has a great influence on the market. And it's also something, if we are talking about operational profile, this is really where you can say that, okay, now I'm entering EU waters. What should I expect when I go in with a load of cargo and then go out again? So what should I expect of carbon credits, and what should be available? And contrary to the CII scheme, where we don't see any penalties yet, there are some defined penalties in not complying with the EU trading scheme. Of course, we have to see it in place first, but it's also in place that there are some non-compliance measures here. So can I know it's new, and so how do you see that coming into play for the part of the operations where you are in? So maybe Nick, do you have any opinions on this?
Oops, I was on mute there for a second. I think it's from our angle on the weather side. It's a matter of we gotta do the best we can do for weather forecasting and how that's impacting maritime industry. And then with the TVOS, for example, that I presented about with they have multi-objective voyage optimization, and I think that is the next. That's the future of weather routing and keeping track of emissions So I think that's critical for when you're trying to decarbonize your vessels. So keeping an eye on how weather is impacting the voyages and what all it's all interconnected. When it's not just focusing on weather, but also everything. Weather is a critical part of it, but it's everything is interconnected, and as you guys said, it's getting more complicated with time. So that's my input. I'll pass the to somebody else for input.
Yes, because Lars, if you can comment on that, I mean, data really becomes important now. I mean, you've been reporting to IMO, DCS, you've been reporting DU, MRV, but now, and maybe you hadn't had, maybe, I mean, they are okay data, they are verified by class, but now it means a lot that they are accurate and as little as possible, of course.
I agree. To be honest, I'm not yet in a position to talk about these ETSs. It's still new, but on the data part, I can definitely say something because we have verified data and we have verifiers, and verifiers are becoming better and better in understanding what it is that they need to verify. Because yes, in the past we have seen many vessels reporting very strange numbers, not being corrected. And we might still need to see procedures and processes in place for correcting incorrect data so that we can have true verified data. We also see more and more automated systems, digital systems that can actually be used in this process of collecting the data. I think that's another benefit. And in our company, this is also something that we are working with, because we all know that when the chief engineer has to write down the numbers on the yellow note on board, there is typically room for a lot of errors, and this will then have an effect on the calculation of the ETSs. So on the data part, I can only say that we see a lot more focus and a lot more. Our customers are also more interested in emission reporting. So it becomes more and more strict. There are more and more requirements, and it also means that we need to validate our data more and more. And it also means that there are more and more proper validators available in the market, such as within the classification societies. I'm not saying that this is a solution or anything. All I'm saying is that the data that we saw, let's say, 10 years ago, is definitely improved today, and there is a better understanding in how to validate the data. And then you have more sources of data so that hopefully you can trust your data more. And I guess that's what this is all about, that we all have a trustworthy source of data and then submit it to the regulators for the payment of these ETSs, because EU is just the first to come. I'm sure that there will be many more later.
Thank you. I agree with you. And so just one more on that. So do we have any, let's say, if you look at the automatic data logging, I mean, that can really be complex, and it really has to be monitored and stuff. But do you see anything? Do you see in your company any difference? Are the manual reported data higher, or have you any, let's say?
I would say we have a much better understanding of what is actually going on board. And that has been a very large eye-opener for some, because maybe some people were thinking that all vessels were just using constant power, and that the 24-hourly report would be a consistent period, but this is very far from the truth. So I think there are many hours to be spent in looking into the actual data and in understanding how the vessels are really behaving, which is a surprise to some. Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much. That's also what I think. Alexander, do you have anything on? I mean, it must be good for you that ETS comes in. I mean, savings are important.
So what's interesting is that ETS and among many others, I would say regulation that appears. There's more and more regulation that pushes more and more the shipping companies and the shipping industry to move forward and to go in the net zero economy, which is a tremendous challenge. And what is interesting is that many companies are looking forward for green fuels. And we didn't mention that because this is another issue, green fuels. But many other industries will look for these green fuels as well. And there's a question of the availability and a question also of the price of these green fuels. And I believe, I mean, if you look at the report and the studies that are made on these green fuels, all of them said in the future, they will have an increase on the demand, but also a strong increase on the prices. And this will push, again, all the optimization that we are talking today, the Voyage optimization, a better digitalization of the shipping industry that allows us to have a better understanding of what impacts exactly and what we could benefit from the multi-parameters that impact the ship efficiency. All what we are doing today will still be very useful and very efficient, even if we are 100% green fuel. I think we will never get 100% green fuel, but nevertheless, even if we are 50% green fuel, all what is done today will be used even in the next decades. So, and ETS is one of these constraints that pushes to this transition. So I really believe that we are at the beginning of a tremendous change in the shipping industries and to have a much better and very fine understanding of how the ship behaves. And I just comment on Lars on the quality of the data is very crucial, and high frequency data is also very crucial because we see weather event. I suppose that Nick also, when they use the AIS data at high frequency, they really see, and we really see when the ship is slowed down or accelerated due to some weather conditions or even to some current, local currents. And when you really crosses these meanders, we really see this on high frequency data and not on the noon report. Well, but we can discuss many hours on that, and maybe we have the time in a face-to-face meeting to discuss on that in the future.
But it's interesting that we are still discussing noon data. Because, I mean, we should have come a bit further, but it's still the main source, I think, for the reporting. Jakob, another complexity in your system, the ETS.
Yeah, I mean the ETS, of course, our aim would be to give. I mean, we cover the IMO, DCS, EU MRV, and giving overview of that. This is, of course, the ETS is for now very much coupled to the EU MRV part, and our ambition would be to give, you could say, a better overview and management of you could say having the right quotas in place. Of course, if you have drop-in fuels, that may reduce, and maybe also looking a little bit more into where do you actually consume your biofuels if you're anyway buying them. Of course, that can be a smart way to where you consume it. But to the talk about data collection, I mean, we have a lot of nav boxes out sailing. I think for around 4,500 today, and of course we want to facilitate more automated data collection, having all this hardware and all these vessels out sailing. So of course we want to be able to facilitate, but not necessarily be the one bringing all the hardware or sensors on board. But we have a platform where we can actually facilitate more automated reporting, which would be one of our focuses this year coming out, because there will be increasing demand for having more data, to have more breakdowns. We saw it with the latest MEPC, more requirements to have voids with, you could say, adjustments, etc. So that would only increase the demand for more reporting. So we should make sure that we also make it a livable life for the people on board, that we don't just increase the burden of reporting. And of course the benefit in terms of automation reporting and going back to the basic load, of course, this gives better insight to what Laios was saying. You get better insight to what is really happening, and you can identify the good behavior versus the one that have the not bad behavior, but maybe bad practices on board. For why is vessel A performing so much better than vessel B? Well, it's because they are better utilizing the asset, or the, you could say, auxiliary engines, or how they start and stop the boilers, or etc., which is really difficult to do on non-reporting basis. So I think it would help us a lot to come even further in optimization, definitely, if we get more accessible automated data, but also, you could say, having it scalable and available for, you could say, the average vessel out there, which is, I think, the challenge today.
Thank you very much. Yes, it is definitely challenging times that we are going into. I have looked through the Q&A. I think we have answered all the questions that we have met today. So any closing remarks from any of you participants here in this little forum here? Is there anything based on what you heard today that you want to comment on? I think maybe we've been around it.
Yeah, I think we have covered a lot here, and I think all the different participants here come with a lot of different valid points in terms of how you improve the CII, definitely, and probably there's not a single strategy that would get you to the point where you need to be, if we look at what would be required for us as an industry to actually get where we want to be in terms of reducing global emissions, which is the end target, of course, not just CII, but if we look at the broader scheme.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And let's see what happens with the CII, because we have all these rating D and rating E, and you're not supposed to, and you're not. I mean, it will be interesting to see what happens in IMO with what really happens if you're in D and E for a longer time than you are supposed to be. So I think that's something everybody is looking towards getting to know, because I think it will come with the market. The market will respond to this. So probably the market also will give penalties to the vessels that are outside where they should be. I think maybe that's the direction where we're going to.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, guys. Apologies for the disturbing start with my router and everything, but I hope you'll stay tuned for tomorrow. There'll be another session tomorrow, and we'll have some other participants with other views on this. So I really want to say thank you to all of you for coming today and coming with your views. Also, thank you to the sponsors here for this event, and then also thank you to BS Group for arranging this webinar. So thank you very much for coming, and wish you a great rest of the day.
Yeah. Bye
You
bye.
too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Well,
Bye bye.
Bye.
yes, bye.